That's cool. Great way to start the stream. But yeah, let's rewind this video. Let's get into it.
Angry young men.
Far-right extremists.
Radicalize young men.
Young boys are being radicalized online.
Starting off strong, huh?
If you're a man, doesn't it feel like every woman hates you? The data proves you're right. Young women are way more progressive than men at the same age, and more men are...
Let me turn on captions. Because I'm not one of those people that I don't really hear everything right all the time. But the captions really saves me, helps me out.
Woman hates you. The data proves you're right. Young women are way more progressive than men at the same age, and more men are being painted as becoming radical and far-right extremists. But why is this happening? In this video, we're going to...
I mean, let's be realistic. The whole Andrew Tate movement really drove that narrative hard. Andrew Tate, Nico, all these guys, the alpha males. So quote unquote alpha males. It makes sense why the public perception would be that way. But also, how common are OnlyFans models, right? I feel like we see it on both sides if you really pay attention.
Follow the data, the incentives, the institutions, and the history to figure out how the gender divide actually happened, why it's accelerating, and what we can do before you grow old and single. Take a look at the collapsing birth rates. A stable society needs 2.1 children per woman just to survive, but the female fertility rate in the United States...
Also, if you guys can't hear, if anything doesn't sound right on stream, please let me know. Put it in the comments so I can fix that. Because I think I know how to navigate it now live on stream to help fix those issues. Fingers crossed, right?
Canada, the UK, France, Germany, and Italy are all sitting at numbers way below replacement. But one thing is clear, this is a crisis, and this is the most concerning data I've ever covered on this channel. This is why. Listen, I'll say the quiet part out loud that nobody wants to say. According to the data, the ideological shift is overwhelmingly happening on the female side, not the male side.
But I think I'm just too old or something. I'm like, why is anyone married? You tell me, why aren't people married?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's the women. The women are...
It's all the women's fault. I don't know. I think it's the men's fault, primarily. If you really want to be a man about it, I think you should take 100% accountability and be like, it's our fault. We should do better. But I don't know. I have a very extremist view of things sometimes.
Extremely liberal. No one talks about that, especially after the last election. There's a 45-point difference.
The reason for that is not what you think. Here's where things get interesting and honestly a little bit bizarre, because baked into this narrative of men becoming misogynists and radicalized is a paradox that I'm about to expose to you. The story you always hear is the same. Men are becoming radicalized. Men are falling into extremism. The manosphere is brainwashing young boys. But here's the contradiction.
It was huge
and
during
this
COVID
is the part that
for
absolutely nobody wants to acknowledge for some reason.
Right?
Men's ideology hasn't actually shifted that much. They've stayed roughly where they were about 10, 15, or even 20 years ago on many of the major points. And even compared to 100, 200, 300, and so on years ago, they're not radically different. A little bit more progressive, but not radically. The study we looked at earlier isn't the only one noticing this caked-in trend. That's not my opinion. This is Pew, Gallup, YouGov, take your pick. So think about this logically. If men stayed the same and women moved, why is the entire culture narrative focused on the male radicalization? Well, because of one thing. There is an agenda. They have made it clear to us, and if they didn't want us to believe that, they wouldn't be saying it. In 2019, the American Psychological Association released an official guideline declaring that traditional masculinity, stoicism, competitiveness, leadership, risk-taking is inherently harmful. The United Nations, through...
Wait, let's start again?
Psychological Association released an official guideline declaring that traditional masculinity, stoicism, competitiveness, leadership, risk-taking is inherently harmful.
What? That's great. Competitiveness, masculinity, leadership, risk-taking. How is that inherently harmful?
The United Nations, through the He for She movement, teaches that global gender problems originate primarily from male behavior patterns. Corporate advertising and HR, from Gillette to Nike to Dove, constantly portray men as violent, impulsive, or in need of ideological correction, all the while presenting women as morally superior. And academia, especially gender studies programs,
for sure, for a while. What is Raxon World saying? Shoot. Jehovah's Witness. You're a Jehovah's Witness, man? What's going on? What does that have to do with the video? I'm
since the
confused.
1980s have built its entire framework on the idea that masculinity is a political problem
Explain,
that
brother.
must be dismantled and re-engineered. So the message is clear and coordinated.
Are you saying to be a Jehovah's
What
Witness,
is
that's
the
the
Lemon
answer
Law?
to the problem society's facing? Become a Jehovah's
The
Witness?
Lemon Law is a law designed to help if
Honestly,
you're having
I
problems.
think that's a way better
Across
route
these
than
institutions,
all of
men
the
are
youth
the
is
issue.
taking. For sure.
Masculinity is the
Keep 'em away
problem,
from
and
degeneracy.
the culture must fix them. This isn't about, hey man, you're becoming too radical and it's hurting society and you need to stop. It's about, we want you to fit into our program. We already socially engineered and radicalized women in the 20th century, and now you just need to get on board with our agenda.
I do think women have been radicalized in the last couple decades for sure. A lot of them have been going to, most people go to universities nowadays are females. Most people getting university degrees are females, especially the higher degree, the higher the percentage of females getting them. It's crazy. And universities are known for being extremely left-wing places. A lot of people get radicalized there. It's just the truth.
Or else, we will label your perfectly rational view of life in the world as radical until you simply get tired of it and throw in the towel. And frankly, from my experience and the first-hand evidence of the internet, men are just not having that. That's why you have the reaction of the manosphere influencers like Andrew Tate and guys like that, who I have to say I have my disagreements with as a practicing Catholic. You stretch a rubber band far enough, eventually it's going to snap back at you.
Yeah.
Now all this starts to make a lot of sense when we look at
I
the
love our
actual
Catholic brothers.
facts, and the facts are
I'm Hispanic,
insane
so
because the really radical
born
stuff
with
happens
Catholics.
at the incentive level, the incentive structures that society has placed for women. The modern economy rewards women for becoming more liberal and punishes them for becoming more traditional. Think about it. Women now earn 60% of bachelor's degrees, 70% of master's
talking
degrees,
about.
nearly 60% of all PhDs, and universities are basically ideological factories, and their ideology is overwhelmingly progressive. And what
Yeah.
exactly do universities incentivize for women? Career-first identity, anti-family framing, don't settle too soon, distrust of men, hyper-individual autonomy, therapy language morality, gender-based activism, secular spirituality over religious commitment. None of this is a conspiracy, it's just the modern incentive system, and I think they would happily admit that to you. And they're all trying to sell this perspective
so.
to you that it's all coming from an organic feminist movement. This is all just grassroots and it's just natural. This is the natural progression of life, but the evidence just becomes overwhelmingly against that.
Hit
When
us
we
with
look
it.
into
What
this
is
with
it?
sober eyes, these schools
Sober
are not
eyes, come on
neutral
now.
playgrounds. According to a Manhattan Institute study,
All right.
7 out of 10 students in the US are exposed to at least one critical social justice concept in K-12 classes, even in private and parochial institutes. Another study found that most schools in North America teach left-wing racial ideology as if it were an established fact, even though it's highly disputed. Global parliamentary researchers in Australia concluded that progressive ideology is so deep-seated that most teachers don't even see it as an ideology anymore. And when you look at education schools, the institutions that train teachers,
That's
one
not funny.
historian observes that progressivism is the ruling ideology there. Again, none of this comes to us as a surprise, but these studies back it up. In other words, the pipeline for ideology runs from teacher training to curriculum to classroom, all from one source. And if you question it as a teacher, your
pipeline,
entire
guys.
career is
Pipeline
at
for
risk
the
in
children
places like
to go
Canada.
through.
The tenured professor Francis Widdowson was
You tell them on
terminated in
purpose.
December
Who
2021
knows?
after publicly criticizing the university's indigenization agenda and other ideological positions.
And you are no longer employed at Mount Royal University. What happened?
An Indigenous scholar activist, because I was defending a journalist who had been pushed out of her job for referring to a book title that had a racial epithet in it. And as a result of that, this Indigenous scholar activist by the name of Gabrielle Lindstrom, who now goes by the name Gabrielle
Cancel
Weasel, she
culture.
mobilized an anonymous student group against me. A whole bunch of her support.
Do we not remember the whole Jordan Peterson situation that propelled him to fame over there in Canada? You know, and he's still facing major issues against the Canadian, not government, but the school he was attending that he was tenured in. And I heard he's not doing well, you know, with his health. We'll pray for him, for sure.
Orders piled on. I was
He helped
found
me
to
out a
have
lot.
harassed her.
Loved
An
Jordan Peterson.
arbitrator later ruled her firing as disproportionate and unjust, although she never regained her position.
Because a number of Indigenous scholar activists and a trans activist feel unsafe about me making arguments that they don't like, it has been the arbitrator decided that I couldn't return.
This shows a concrete event where ideological nonconformity led to professional consequences in a university setting. But it's not only about firing dissenting voices. choices. Institutions themselves respond to financial and reputational incentives.
Oh,
A
yeah.
UK study found
Man,
higher education reforms
these places
created
make a shit ton of
perverse
money, bro.
incentives
I don't
for
know if you've
universities
seen
to shape
their
behaviors and
profits. It's crazy.
ideologies in order to secure funding and regulatory advantages. This data comes from the Institute of Fiscal Studies. Another paper documents how colleges respond to student aid, loan default penalties, and enrollment benchmarks by shaping admissions and outcomes. And a commentary in University Affairs explains that there's no such thing as pure science. The interests of different parties shape the questions being asked, and how incentive structures direct how those questions are answered. Let's put it simply, if a university is rewarded for diversity metrics, for activism, for social justice frameworks, then people inside it will naturally lean that way, because that is how institutional survival, funding, and reputation are built.
That
Now, it
makes
really
sense.
seems
If
to me
they're
that the
incentivizing that pathway, it would make sense that people would, naturally go to that pathway because human beings are creatures of, we seek the path of least resistance a lot of times, which is not always the correct path.
problem that these ideologues are pushing is not that they have a problem with authoritarianism, but rather that the authoritarianism isn't of their flavor. The system is rigged to ensure one outcome. Go to school, you become progressive. Delay your family, become progressive. Enter corporate HR pipeline, become progressive. It's ironic for a position that always claims women aren't given a chance and given a choice in a patriarchal society, but are they really being given a choice here, or is the outcome completely fixed? And if they were really given the choice, which one do you think they would choose? If we had a university program specifically funded and dedicated to training women to become better wives and better housekeepers, how many women
Hey,
would quit
yo.
their STEM degrees in order to
Imagine that someone starts a school like that. I think that'd go viral for sure. I don't think it could ever become a real school. I think the culture has shifted so far in that direction that we, I think we're probably at a point of no return at how things are going, especially with AI coming in and changing so much for us and automation in every single regard. It's going to be an interesting future, guys. Interesting.
pursue that. Personally, from talking to a lot of women in my generation, I think a very high number would. But things
Right.
only become
He's
worse
getting
when
it,
we
boys.
look at the
He's getting it.
male situation. Hey, so before we dive in today, I just want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of the gracious support that this channel has received over the
Support
last
these guys.
little while. It's really difficult to find sponsors for videos like this, and so this one is sponsor free. The fact
Support
is
my
these
boy.
videos take weeks and
Lungs of
sometimes
Faith.
months to produce each, and I'm currently a one-man team,
never seen
but
his videos
luckily,
before,
the
but
supporters over at buymeacoffee.com/lungs of faith
So
help
far.
make these videos possible. So if you like these videos, please
Support
consider
whatever that
input on
is.
future top cities corporation entire system. And this isn't speculation, this is hard economic data. Over the last 15 to 20 years, more than 7 million prime age men ages 25 to 54 have disappeared from the workforce in the United States alone. Where exactly are they? They're not in school, they're not in training, they're not in job hunting, and they're not transitioning between careers. They're simply gone from the labor force. But why? Are they all suddenly Bitcoin millionaires and just don't need to
All
work
of us.
anymore? Are they living off the backs of female slave economy?
Yes.
Oops, wasn't supposed to say that one out loud. And today, the labor force participation rate for men is the lowest it's been since the Great Depression. Among young men, 18 to 29, the numbers are even worse. Unemployment has surged, not in education, employment, or training. Entire segments of young men are living completely outside the productive economy and the bounds of civilization. And how are they surviving? The data shows disability payments, welfare payments, parental support, random gig scraps, or literally doing nothing at all. Economists call this the male dropout crisis. Sociologists call it the great male opting out. And here's the core point. Women are being ideologically pulled into the system. Men are being economically pushed out of it. That means men aren't getting college indoctrination. Men aren't embedded in corporate HR departments. Men aren't absorbing ideological
lot more
messaging 8
resistant to
hours a
these,
day. Most men aren't even in the building. So of
metrics.
course men's worldview stays relatively stable. They're not inside
Most men I know listen to these things that are trying to be done, and they're like fucking gay. I don't want to do that shit, and I'll just move forward. Those are the kind of guys I know. But I mean, I was in the military world for quite a while, so me listening to all this shit, I'm like, fucking gay. Get out of my face. I'm not doing any of that bullshit. I hate it.
the institutional machinery that rewrites ideology. Think about other times we've seen that in civilization. Things like this typically lead to some sort of a movement. This raises a question that nobody ever asks, but everyone feels. Why are corporations, school systems, governments, NGOs, pharmaceutical companies, makeup brands, food companies, clothing companies, literally every sector of society obsessed with shaping women's worldviews? Why do they spend billions of dollars every year on
They do the same
campaigns
thing for men,
targeted
though.
at women? If women are supposedly tired of the patriarchy and finally empowered, then why does every powerful institution on earth treat them like a demographic they have to constantly convince, recruit, affirm, and ideologically maintain? Think about it. Why do governments pour money into women-centric advertising? Why do NGOs frame every issue through women and girls? Why is every corporate marketing department obsessed with female empowerment messaging? Why are pharmaceutical companies spending billions on contraception campaigns, hormone campaigns, fertility control messaging? Why do school boards and
That is true.
universities create bureaucracies around gender equality, women's studies?
And what's up with the push against motherhood, bro? That's the one that throws me off. So many of these young women in their late 20s, they're just like, hell no, I don't want a kid. I'm like, why? I'm so confused. Or like, especially from my background, Hispanic household, it's so beautiful to give life and be a mother, and strong mothers are rewarded super well. But there's just been this pushback that I've noticed from females in that age group. They're like, don't want a kid. I was like, okay, 33, 35, nah, I don't want a kid. I was like, oh shit, bro. I don't get that. Doesn't make sense to me. But, to each their own, whatever.
DEI for female students? Why do political parties build entire election strategies around the female vote?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
If women were naturally aligned with these worldviews, wouldn't you think they wouldn't need to be so sold? And you don't have to look any further than the gargantuan numbers they're spending. UN Women's budget was $1.3 billion spent between 2010 and 2020, explicitly on programs to reshape gender norms and shift cultural attitudes. The US government has spent hundreds of millions annually, around $200 to $500 million a year on gender ideology programs abroad. So these are programs outside of the United
That's what our
States.
tax money is
Over
being spent on, guys.
$4.5 billion
Useful shit.
spent on women and girls initiatives since 2000. Many of these programs
I
openly
don't mind
target fertility norms,
women
sexual
initiatives
norms, family
if they're
planning,
like, healthy ones, promoting physical sports, good careers, things like that. But if it's encouraging abortions and stuff like that, I'd rather not, my government fund those kinds of activities, right? But I think we're cooked regardless.
attitudes, traditional gender roles, and they describe their goal as changing beliefs and behaviors at scale. Planned Parenthood's advocacy spends over $45 million per year on political campaigns aimed specifically at women. But here's the thing, you don't spend $100 billion convincing someone of something they already supposedly believe. Where big money goes and where return on investment is unclear, the most plausible conclusion is that there's something they value more than short-term money. They're loyal to an ideology. And to see these insane tactics, all you have to do is look at where the money flows. The Rockefellers heavily funded the Women's Bureau, the National Urban League, and various women's reform.
Why is it that the Rockefellers are always mentioned for all these kinds of, negative outcomes in society? For example, right now, this woman thing, or creating the current education system, or the current banking system. They're tied to so many things, it's crazy.
Initiatives in the
And to
early
this
20th
day,
century,
it doesn't
John
end.
D. Rockefeller Jr. personally funded Margaret Sanger, the infamous eugenicist founder of Planned Parenthood, who said things like, "More children from the fit, less from the unfit. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and birth control must lead ultimately to a cleaner race. And the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it." This is someone with zero empathy, zero concern for human life, and yet is
I was double checking on the stream. What did he say?
"We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and birth control must lead ultimately to a cleaner race. And the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it." This is someone with zero empathy, zero.
Also, if you look at the stats, it's a lot of black mothers that are committing abortions. Heavily. This woman, I'm pretty sure, is a known racist based on her comment, and she pushed heavily for it, but yet these black females are getting indoctrinated and pushed into that heavily. Crazy. But they think it's empowerment. But that's what the white woman wants you to think.
concern for human life, and yet is being funded and placed at the center of apparently humanity's mission to enrich our lives. The Rockefeller Foundation openly wrote that lowering birth rates among undesirable groups was a goal. Population control and social engineering were the two biggest research priorities. Now take Alfred Kinsey. They even funded his studies based on sexual assault victims, lots of which being minors, that stripped these cases of their criminal status and used them as data points in his research, seeking to prove how sexual nonconformity is a good thing. His first grant in 1941 was $1,600. Not too much, but by 1947, his project was pulling in about $40,000 to $100,000 a year, which keep in mind is about $600,000 to $1 million in today's currency, among the tens of dozens, if not hundreds, of other like experiments that they're also funding. This money financed massive sex history interviews, some involving minors, and set the stage for what many call the sexual revolution, which I did a whole
Guys, what the fuck? That's our history.
video on called The Biggest Lie We Ever Bought. If you haven't seen that, definitely go watch it after this video. It goes much more into detail than what I can do here. But the point still stands and the question is still unanswered. If a movement is truly organic, it spreads on its own. But if a movement contradicts human nature, you have to subsidize it, you have to incentivize it, and you have to market it relentlessly. So why do governments and corporations treat women like a population that must be constantly maintained? Because the worldview being sold is not the worldview human nature defaults to. Women are not naturally hostile to family or motherhood or faith or stability. They have to be coaxed away from those things with promises of a hypothetical utopia, career fulfillment, and sexual freedom, lifestyle independence, empowerment through consumption. In other words, if the product was really that good, it would sell itself. It doesn't. So they market it harder, and that's why every institution is obsessed with winning women. And by who? Ironically, men. Perverted men. Ones like Michael Foucault, who advocated for the abolition of the age of consent laws in France. Ones like Alfred Kinsey, who used minor rape victims as data points in his deviant sex agenda. But it gets even darker than that, because when you look at how he got to where—
This is the ideology that women are being manipulated by. These are the people who help steer its cause, right? Think about that.
we are now, you have to go back to the early 20th century, because World War I and II did not just reshape geopolitics, they completely reshaped the culture of the home. See if you can notice the common denominator. Those two wars pulled tens of millions of men out of their houses, out of their communities, and out of their roles as spiritual and moral anchors of the family. And the architects and modernist ideologues behind the sexual revolution that we see today understood exactly what that meant. A home without a man is a home without resistance. While the men were overseas, women became the
I don't know if you guys have ever seen, but there's been interviews of, child predators, and they ask, what made you target certain, children? And a lot of them said that they would look at the household. They would see if there's a strong fatherly presence. They were probably not gonna, go to that house and molest the children. But if they saw that it was vulnerable, there was no strong manly presence, they're like, oh, that's an easy target. We can go in there, right? Look what's happening. The male presence in households is very, very low.
Primary audience for every new form of messaging: government propaganda, mass advertising, corporate marketing, film, magazines, and emerging psychological techniques. For the first time in history, institutions had unfiltered access to the emotional and social center of the household.
Think about it. Institutional giants promoted a war, sent all the men to the war, then they promoted, oh, we need people to do the jobs the men left, so women come to the workforce. They make a whole bunch of profit at the war because they have women still working the jobs and it's a little bit cheaper. And then the men come back, but the women are still working. They never fully go back. And it just keeps moving forward and it becomes worse and worse throughout time. And the companies make forever profit. Fuck, guys.
And they used it aggressively. This wasn't because women were weak, it's because women are the relational core of civilization. Women shape the moral environment. Women are the gatekeepers of culture to a large extent, and modernists understood this, so it targeted women first. That if it could get women to completely drink their Kool-Aid, that men would eventually follow because they wanted sex. I think they got that wrong, but I'll explain that in a little bit. And you might be saying, Zach, you're such a conspiracy theorist. All of this is just conservative propaganda. Well, then why did advertisers, Hollywood studios, and early PR firms like Edward Bernays openly write about this. He said, if you want to change society, you don't start with the men. You start with the women because women influence everything downstream. The home, the children, the social expectations, and yes,
Poison
even the
them from
behavior of men.
within.
There's a reason that 70 to 80% of all consumer purchasing decisions in North America are made by women. And here's where the manipulation of men comes in, because modernists assume that once women embraced the new worldview, men would eventually follow, not because the men were ideologically convinced, but because the men wanted to stay in relationship with the women. In other words, if we convert the women, the men will cave. They'll go along with
So we're
anything if
basically
it
all
means
cut.
sex, companionship, and peace in the home. But we must remember, this isn't based off fact, this is completely theorized, and the thing is, for a while it worked. For several decades, men did silently go along with the new cultural program because it was so incremental. It's like the boiling frog theory. You put a frog in boiling water, it's instantly gonna jump out, but you put it in lukewarm water and slowly turn up the temperature, it'll stay until it cooks to death. But here's the theological reality. Man is not
That's us.
designed to be led by cultural propaganda. He is designed by God to lead by virtue. He is built to reject falsehood even when it costs him something.
I hope he ties this well, bringing God into the picture, because I feel like that's the best answer to these issues. Personally, I am a Christian, so.
Even when it costs him comfort or approval or intimacy. That's what Christ did on the cross. Christ showed us the true way of life, that we must pursue truth all the way unto
right, dude.
crucifixion, all the way until we have nails being driven through our very hands and feet and being crucified on the cross that our persecutors built for us. And that's what we're seeing now. The male opt-out,
germs
the
do you grow a day?
manosphere, the backlash, the Christian movement, the reactionaries, they're all waking up. Whether you believe it's misguided,
How do you say that? Fajada. I don't know. I'm sorry for pronouncing that wrong, probably. How many germs do you grill a day? I have no clue what you're talking about, if you want to.
or not, it's fundamentally the moment when men
Expand on that,
stopped
that would be
being
great.
willing to trade their integrity for acceptance. And once the sex is no longer enough to make men submit to the propaganda, the whole system starts to fall apart naturally. Men aren't rejecting women, they're rejecting the ideological system that hijacked women. And the bad news
Facts.
to all the evil people
I
behind
think
this is
that's
that they
tough.
will simply
I think that is a huge point. We're not rejecting the women. We're rejecting the ideology that they subscribe to. Because I'm a big fan of women. But I'll talk to a lot of these girls, and I don't like the way they think, bro. Honestly. It's trash.
never win this battle because they fundamentally misunderstand human nature. And that's because they philosophically reject the creator of human nature. They reject the blueprint itself, and that's why they can't succeed. They don't understand human nature because they don't believe it was created. To them, people are raw material, pliable, programmable, and infinitely malleable. And if you
I have to Google this. Germination, which is proper. I am very germable, actually. Oh yeah, I am beginning to grow. I am only 24, so statistically I'm gonna make it to like 75. That's the average. So I still have 2/3 of my life to live. 66% left to germinate. So I'd say yes.
If you just tweak the right knobs on the dashboard of society, you will get the result that you want, and you will control the society the way you want. And that's why their system is already cracking. Not because of some heroic rebellion, not because of a political movement, but because they tried to build a civilization on top of a blueprint that they don't even believe exists. You can't rewire men to stop being men. You can't rewire women to stop being women. You can't replace family with ideology. You can't replace virtue with dopamine. You can't replace meaning with activism. There's no version of reality where that works long term. And look, let's be honest, some people on the reactionary side see this collapse too. Like the Andrew Tates of the world, the manosphere guys, the black pill, the red pill, whatever pill movements. Even I as a Catholic can admit that they get some things right about the symptomology of the problem. But their conclusion is basically fine. Burn it down. Don't marry. Don't commit. Don't care. Stack cash. Sleep around and detach.
Are you married now? I would never bring the state into my affairs. I don't chase women, Michael. I absorb.
Neither.
But guys, I must say, this is not the Catholic.
I tried everything. Coffee, Pomodoro, and binaural beats, but nothing stuck.
This is not the Christian. This is not the Christ-like approach. In fact, this
What
whole
else you got
video
for
we
me,
spent
bro?
discussing
Keep
a
it
lot of the
cooking.
sins of women and how women have fallen for the propaganda and drank the Kool-Aid and the sin of Eve. Woman's fundamental
But so
flaw,
many men
which
have
is
too, bro.
rejecting authority and wanting to be deviant, and the ideologues and the architects of the sexual revolution understood that deeply and they exploited that. But we haven't gotten to the sin of men. The sin of men is simply inactivity. It's passivity. It's just sitting by and watching and complaining and detaching.
Yo, is he calling us out right now?
And becoming materialistic. That is the
That is
sin
true,
of
though, it
Adam.
is
Think
true.
about this. The fall would have never happened if Adam caught Eve
No,
in the act
brush
of
my
eating the
teeth a
fruit and
lot,
said,
and
Eve,
I chew a lot
don't
of
do
gum.
this is wrong, obey me. But in
Paranoid
fact,
about
he
that
didn't
stuff.
do that.
I
He
like
just
to keep
sat
my
by, and that's why the fall of man happened.
clean.
It wasn't just Eve. It was a dual effort. It was a combined effort because the leadership that Eve was under failed its course. I understand that all of us feel like this
man.
is wrong and that we want to do something about it, but we have to analyze what moral groundwork do we even stand on to be able to assert morality, to be able to assert ethics. Because under an atheist, materialistic worldview, unfortunately, we're a bunch of chaos, we're a bunch of particles clashing into each other in space, and knowledge is actually impossible. And in that system, tyranny is the only form of government that can ever logically work. Because Catholicism was the first framework that didn't ask me to pretend the world was better than it is, or worse than it is. It just told the truth. And here's the truth of every ideology, from the progressive engineers to the manosphere influencers, that they keep missing. Men and women aren't arbitrary social categories. They're part of a design that you can't rewrite without breaking everything built on top of it. You can fight nature for a little while. You can even force people to act against themselves for a generation or two, maybe 3 or 4, but eventually reality snaps back like a rubber band that you can't break. Every artificial system collapses under its own weight. Every ideology that rejects the creator ends up colliding with creation itself. That's why the Bible tells us that the wisdom of man will ultimately be made foolish in the eyes of God. Church attendance amongst young adults has seen its first spike in decades. Google searches for traditional marriage, Catholic Mass, and Orthodox theology are at 10-year highs. And for the first time ever, over 60% of Gen Z says that modern dating culture is broken, hopeless, or anti-human. But guys, we can't lose hope. So no, I'm not black-pilled, I'm not white-pilled, I'm not any color-coded internet philosophy. I'm simply Catholic. I believe that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and he is the author of life itself. The people trying to reshape humanity are standing on sand. They don't even have the tools to assert to you that what you're doing is right or wrong, or that Catholicism is false. They don't even accept that truth exists. But the church, the thing that has outlasted empires, revolutions, and ideologies, and whole civilizations for 2,000 years, that is built on rock. Not because the institution is flawless, but because the anthropology is. And that's why I'm not discouraged. And the church, the one institution on this earth that is built by the author of that truth, isn't going anywhere. The gates of hell shall not prevail against the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Not now, and not ever. Until next time, this is...
Honestly, right video by the guy. I need to
Zach with lungs of...
hit the latrine real quick, use the restroom. I'll be right back.